The terms of the peace must send a message that aggression does not pay. This is why there can be no equivalence between Russia and Ukraine in how this Council refers to this war.
The UN Security Council nevertheless adopted a resolution for the war's third anniversary that did frame an equivalence between the two countries. Many see what's happening as Ukraine being sold out, Europe being abandoned and Russia being rehabilitated. An indication of this was perhaps UN General Assembly adoption of the Ukraine-European worded anniversary resolution. Donald Trump has since walked back comments that Ukraine's president started Russia's war, but this comment remains.
A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left.
But is there another way to read it all? And with Washington refocusing on Asia and China in particular, how do Tibet and Taiwan, which supports Ukraine, interpret these developments? Today, we are joined by special guests, Lobsang Sangay, former Central Tibetan Administration President, William Stanton, former American Institute in Taiwan director, and Chen Fang-yu, Soochow University Political Science Assistant Professor. A very warm welcome to you all on the show today.
Thank you.
Even before Ukraine was not invited to the table in Saudi Arabia, Trump or his cabinet colleagues said Ukraine's NATO membership was off the table, that returning to Kiev's 2014 borders was unrealistic, that the US expected repayment for its $65 billion arms to Ukraine by Kiev, giving the US access to $500 billion worth of critical minerals. However, former Trump Deputy National Security Advisor Matt Pottinger has a different take. Watch this.
President Trump's approach, he uses all kinds of rhetoric when he's negotiating, I would wait to see what the actual result of his negotiation is with Ukraine. If he does a deal to stop the war with Russia, and that deal protects Ukraine's sovereignty, wherever that demarcation line is, as long as Ukraine has a very significant security guarantee with obvious military support from Western countries to ensure that Russia is not tempted to resume the war, that's a very good outcome if that's where we end up. That's actually good for Taiwan because it means that the Ukrainians will have in effect halted aggression. That should send a positive signal to Taiwan. It should send a negative signal to Beijing.
Sekyung, do you agree with Matt Pottinger's comments there?
I do. I know Matt Pottinger quite well, and he was there at Halifax, Taipei, and in fact, we discussed on the same topic. As far as Beijing is concerned, initially they wanted Russia to fully occupy Ukraine. That would have been their priority number one. Then they could use that as a pretext to invade Taiwan, right? But then now that has not happened. Their strategy seems to be to prolong the war. Number one, weaken Russia. Two, deplete...
Weaken the US.
No, weaken Russia first economically and make them a junior partner and make them dependent on China. Number two, create war fatigue in Europe and NATO and deplete arsenals of NATO. And three, deplete arsenal of America, and thereby denying or delaying all the arms that America is supposed to sell or give to Taiwan. So they are killing four birds with one stone at the moment. If there is a resolution on Ukraine, right, and then the Ukraine retains the sovereignty and security is provided, then China is very nervous that America could transfer the resources to Asia, and that will be a big deterrence for China as far as Taiwan is concerned. So any solution, if sovereignty and security for Ukraine is guaranteed, then I think it's bad news for China. And then if there is a resolution, and then if Russia becomes neutral, then even at the Security Council, you will have China vis-a-vis Taiwan, right? But then you have four other members, who will be voting against, or perhaps even Russia abstains. It will be like 4 against 1. So that's the scenario Beijing doesn't want.
Right. Bill, your view?
Well, frankly, I like Matt Pottinger. I respect him, but I think his assessment is wildly, overly optimistic, wildly optimistic. First of all, he says we have to wait while Trump is negotiating, but I don't see any negotiation going on. I just see statements that are pro-Russian on the part of Trump, and no real efforts. He's cut Ukraine out of any negotiations. So who's he negotiating with? He's basically saying that, Russia is going to win here. So I was very disappointed in his assessment. We have to wait to see what the deal is going to be. There's no indication there's going to be a deal other than that Russia is going to take everything. So I'm very pessimistic, and I find there's no basis for Pottinger's optimism other than, of course, he worked for Trump and he's a fan of Trump, and he's saying, well, we have to wait and see what Trump's going to accomplish. But meanwhile, the Ukrainians are left out in the cold and the dark, and they're suffering, and the U.S. is not doing anything about it.
Mm-hmm. Professor Chen, is it simply a case that the negotiations haven't progressed that far, that Ukraine and the Europeans will be brought in the next stage? You can address what Soochow talked about. Again, is there a chasm between, full Ukraine capitulation or the loss of sovereignty, the loss of 100% territory, versus Ukraine's position, which it doesn't want to have to give up those particular territories. It sees that as a loss of sovereignty.
Well, admittedly, we have to say that I agree with the assessment that we have to wait and see the outcome. But I have to remind everyone that of the rhetorics of Mr. Trump and of the languages, diplomatic languages or the political languages, they all have outcomes. So in recent days, we see that these very negative comments on Ukraine and also on the European allies have very, very negative outcomes on the credibility of the U.S. And I think for Taiwan, the credibility of the U.S. support and or belief of the U.S. friendship and alliance is very important for the morale of Taiwan's self-defense determinants. So this outcome, we should wait and see for the outcome of the negotiation between the U.S., Russia, Ukraine, and European countries. But we also have to deal with the negative outcomes of all of these rhetorics. Especially, I see a win on the Russians' propaganda over the past 3 years. Because over the past several years, we see the U.S. skepticism that basically says that the U.S. will sold out the allies and see, well, now President Trump blames Zelensky, who led his country to defend against aggressor. I think for Taiwan, we should stand firmly on the democratic allies, especially we are in the front line of the authoritarian diffusion. So we have to stand firmly on everyone who defend against aggressive of the dictators.
Soochow, you would like to respond?
I think we'll have a good debate now. Of course, Taiwan should stand with all the democratic countries. But it was French President Macron who visited China and said, Taiwan is America's problem. That means, Europe or France has nothing to do with it, right? So which democratic countries we are talking about? And then as far as Taiwan is concerned, their best ally is America. Having said that, now what Trump has said, now we must make a distinction with Trump as a businessman, as a person, and as a foreign policy guy. He says things about Greenland and Panama and, and everybody, even, Canada, right? So from his first term, we know he says a lot of things and how much to take it seriously and how much to analyze it, it's to be determined.
But I think Professor Chen is saying whether he means it seriously or not, there is an impact.
Yes, it has, but then it's Trump exception or Trump-centric. the way Europe, I've been to Ukraine to show solidarity with Ukrainians. I spent 36 hours, right? And 3 Iranian drones hit Kyiv on the day I was there. So I've been to Europe also. Ideally, all the territory of Ukraine should be restored to Ukraine. Having said that, you can look at Ireland and issue of Northern Ireland, right? So there are many examples around the world where they do resolve large part of the territory, and some territory will be kept as contentious or not resolved, right? So that's what we have to find.
Okay. So Europe and Ukraine have been blindsided by the level of Washington's outreach to Moscow. Other than wishing to end the war quickly, what else could be behind it? Trump's Ukraine special envoy Keith Kellogg hints at why at the Munich Security Conference. Take a look.
What we're going to try to do is basically force him into actions. What you want to do is force him to actions maybe he's uncomfortable with. What I mean by that is an example. Right now is what we're going to do is try to break this alliance that he currently has. He's got an alliance around with North Korea that wasn't there before. He's got an alliance with Iran that wasn't there before. He's got an alliance with China that wasn't there before, meaning 4 years ago before.
Bill.
Well, I want to emphasize that I don't think Trump is an unbiased observer. He's not a neutral party. We have to remember, back in 2019, the very first phone call he had, 3 months after Zelensky was elected president of Ukraine, he called him up supposedly to congratulate him, I guess, on his presidency. And at that time, what he really wanted to do was to get dirt on President Biden. And he wanted to get, prospective president, he wanted to get dirt on Hunter Biden, his son. And Zelensky didn't play ball. I mean, that's well documented. And it wound up actually there being an impeachment, which the Republicans defeated against the Democrats. They outnumbered them, and you need 2/3 of the Congress if you're going to get a favorable decision on impeachment. And I think President Trump is vengeful. And I think that's why he's so negative in won't deal at all with Zelensky, because Zelensky did not give him what he wanted back in 2019. And I don't think we should overlook that.
Okay. There's that perspective too. Professor Chen, we played the clip from Keith Kellogg, and many believe that Trump is aiming for what we call a reverse Nixon, basically a bold rapprochement towards Moscow that would leave Beijing out in the cold. Do you think that they are attempting that? How successful do you think it could be, and why?
I'm also pessimistic about this. Firstly, there must be some mechanism to guarantee the security of Ukraine and also Europe, and there's none of these mechanisms now going on the table. So that is first. And secondly,
I think there's talk of the European peacekeeping
30,000 troops.
I mean the U.S.
Oh.
I mean, the U.S. should give something to Ukraine, or because NATO is a collective defensive mechanism there. So if the U.S. want to make a deal with Ukraine and also with Russia, there must be some of the mechanism to guarantee the security of Eastern Europe.
We'll get on to that a little bit later, but
yes.
The reason they say is because they need to reposition troops and resources to the Pacific, to Asia.
Yeah. So if you want to make a cooperate with Russia, then I think that is you should be very careful, because there is an alliance of the dictatorship. We see that China and Russia are collaborating with each other very closely, and the nature of the dictatorship cannot be easily be mitigated by this kind of deal. So you cannot make a deal with the dictators and then think that it's safe.
What are the circumstances that are different now compared to what Nixon achieved in 1972, if you could outline?
So think of this. The U.S. cooperated with China at that time, and now China become the major threat to all of the world, including the U.S. Can you make a deal with the Russians and then expect them to just come down and stay to their own territory? I don't think so, because Russia, they will always be aggressive. So you can take a rest, and maybe several years later, and they become more aggressive again. So that is my point. I study authoritarian politics, and we see in the history that the dictators will not comply any of the international conventions.
Soochow.
I'm not Taiwanese. I'm visited here just for less than a week, but I will be pro-Taiwan. I would say you just go for your Taiwanese interests. If U.S. troops can come to Asia, it's good for Taiwan to deter, China. Now, there is ideal world, where you ally with all the democracies, but there is geopolitical world. It's a reality, right? The fact that Nixon went and normalized relationship with China, that means he did manage to pull China out of the Soviet orbit, and then Cold War prevailed, right? So it was bad for us. We suffered. If Russia could be neutralized, make them less dependent on China, then it's a net gain for Taiwan. So that way, I think you can push China. That's why China is a bit nervous. That's why Xi Jinping just happened to call, hey, we are the best buddy for Russia.
Yeah.
Why he's sending all the signals is they're also uncertain, if not nervous.
How willing do you think Russia will be? Does it prize global reintegration above its relationship with China that it depends on so much, as you said? Oil, as well as 90% of the chips are being provided by China. Is it that easy over 4 years?
There are two ways to look at it. From some American specialists say that Russia's economy is 1/10 of America. Doesn't matter what Russia aims to do, but they can never compete with America. Now, when it comes to China, it's almost like 60-65% of America's economy, right? So that's where there is a direct and potent threat from China. Now, if you combine America and NATO, all the allies together, then if you combine Russia and China together, America and its allies are 3 times bigger an economy. So that means they have the potential to be 3 times more powerful militarily to counter China and Russia.
Are you talking about European allies?
European
also
allies,
standing
yes,
together?
Yes.
Okay.
No, it's deep. I really don't think this is a Trump exception. Europe, America's, alliance is bonded and sealed on 500,000 Americans dying during the Second World War. $3 trillion spent by America through Marshall Fund to restore Europe, right? And that is, really deep. And a president coming and making some statements, is not going to fracture, far less, divide and destroy, U.S. and Europe relationship.
Okay. A recent Economist article titled Ukraine Today, Taiwan Tomorrow reports that talk of how the convergence of the European and Asian theatres has given way to military trade-offs as America's arsenals are depleted. Elbridge Colby, Trump's nominee for Undersecretary of Defense, told Taiwan Talks this April 2024. Take a look.
Chinese are depleting and distracting the United States in another theater. And the problem is that the United States is not what it was in 1999, economically, militarily. So we can't do everything, and we have to make choices. My argument is we should make choices for Taiwan's defense, not because I'm out of favor to you, but because I think that's the most in our own interest.
Bill, so as Soochow said, look to Taiwan's interests. If the US is now going to be focused here, combating China, isn't that in Taiwan's interests?
Well, it certainly is, but there are a couple of points. Just as Trump doesn't really care about Ukraine, from all the things he's ever said, he's also indicated he doesn't particularly care for Taiwan either. So my Taiwanese friends are worried, and I'm worried, that if Trump is willing to sell out Ukraine, he'd also be willing to sell out Taiwan.
But the two theaters are very different for Trump.
It's very different because, Taiwan is clearly of greater geostrategic interest to the United States. But I would have liked to hear from Trump one positive statement. He said that Taiwan had stolen Taiwanese technology. Taiwan's indebted to the United States. He said that they owe us. He's very transactional in many ways. So, if he's already said that what he wants is billions of dollars in repayment for Ukraine, is he going to ask the TSMC turn over, become an American company? I mean, what would be the price for his cooperation? If anything, he's always talking about how Xi Jinping is such a great guy.
Is that all part of his strategy, though, Bill, in terms of maybe buttering Xi up, appealing to his ego?
I would hope so, but I don't give him that much credit, frankly. I think he often says exactly what he thinks, and that's worrisome to me.
Should any of us be surprised about this? We just played a clip from April of last year, and of course, we knew the position of the Trump team. So now that Trump won the election, should any of us be surprised at this?
I won't be surprised at all. But I have to, again, remind everyone that is a competition with dictatorships, especially China, include not only on the military, but also on the soft powers. So China is now waging a lot of different kinds of political law warfares, public opinion warfares, and also on the psychological warfares. There's a lot of different things at one time. So again, rhetorics and language all have its consequences. And the U.S., if the U.S. want to lead the world to compete against China, then maybe the leadership of the U.S. and also the Trump team, should pay more attention to not only the military one, but also to take care of.
So you're saying they're giving up their soft power advantage as a superpower? That soft power, convincing persuasion is as important as
So there are some concerns that, so for example, cut off the USAID and a lot of these soft power institutions will have a lot of consequences as well. So I think maybe we should persuade others, the democratic countries, our friends, and also our friends in the U.S. that every dimensions matters.
But I want to go ask you about this issue, which is, so the Finnish leader told Trump that Ukraine is about European security, as you would expect, but it's also about American leadership. How important do you think that is in terms of that leadership for the world? Or do you think that in our multipolar world, there's actually a new definition of global leadership?
Now, I would like to see the present global order, where there is rule of law-based order, is preferable than Chinese, led world order. We know Tibetans have suffered. There's genocide going on, Uyghur area, and cultural genocide in Tibet and repression. We really don't want Beijing-led world order. There is a day and night difference between the two, despite all the hypocrisies and double standard, all the mistakes of the present world order, right? So yes, if we have to choose between what President America says in recent terms, then what Beijing has been doing for the last 70 years, look at the action, it's brutal, right? There is no comparison. America as a whole, it has by and large led the world, and we also wish America does more for Tibet. We always say that, but there you can lobby U.S. Congress. I lobbied U.S. House and Senate and passed Tibetan Policy and Support Act, and President Trump signed it, right? So now we can ask, has he said anything positive about Tibet? Not a word, but he signed the law. So sometimes you have to take what you can get, irrespective of what the principal, thinks or says.
Okay. Bill, let me put to you what Singapore's Defence Minister Ng Eng Hen said at Munich Security Conference. He said that America was moving from a force of moral legitimacy to something closer than a landlord seeking rent. But if we take into consideration what Soochow has told us about that position, is it sometimes more effective to take this approach in terms of achieving the goals that we want?
It may be. I mean, Machiavelli argues for a realpolitik. We have to take what we can and do what we must. But I just don't buy into the idea that there's going to be an easy solution to any of these problems, and I don't think President Trump is the right president at this time for the issues that America faces. And I don't think he's a believer particularly in soft power. I don't think he has particular sympathy, whether it's for NATO or for Ukraine or for Tibet or for anyone outside of the United States. I think he's very focused just on make America great again. That's his byline. And I think that's a very limited point of view, which doesn't allow for an awful lot of action elsewhere.
Professor Chen, many would say that Trump is the right president for this time. He is the one that will stop the war in Ukraine. He is the one that has first introduced a much tougher stance towards China, and he's continuing that. What's your view?
Well, he is chosen by the American people. So he brings a lot of uncertainties to the dictators, but also uncertainties to the allies. So what the world and we must do is to understand how he thinks, how the team is formed, and then we must persuade the Trump administration, all of the team members there, that Taiwan is the necessary, important partner that we can make our own advantage, and also to make some of the national interests. We can pursue the national interests together. And we also have to remind again that competition with dictatorships is a comprehensive, must take a comprehensive approach, not only on the military side, but also a lot of different dimensions.
Okay, we'll end it there. Thank you very much to my guests, Lobsang Sangay, William Stanton, and Chen Fang-yu, for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.